Jean-Baptiste, and this is my artifact for my writing 10704. How Language Shapes the Way We Think, a TED Talk by Lera Bałdycki. She explained that language people speak can influence how they understand and experience the world. She argues that language is not just a tool for communication, they also affect memory, perspective, and thought. Bałdycki give us example where the sun in German can be masculine and in Spanish is feminine. So is the moon. Which brought me to my point one. Does language shape the way we think? A review of a foreign language effects across domain. Wrote by Sylvia, Nicola, Roberto, Lee, and Claudio. This article support and complement Boroditsky TED Talk by addressing how language influenced thinking, how different language shaped perspective and coordination, such as time, space, and color. This review focuses on how using a foreign language can influence decision making, emotion, and reasoning. Together, they support the idea that language is more than communication. It's a tool for perspective and also using your mind to understand where you are. It can affect people understanding and respond to the world. Mind Printer is this journal that wrote about linguistic and language behavior abstract who support Berdisky TikTok by showing through research that the language we use can change the way we think, feel, and make choice. It gives another example of how language influences human mind. And to finish, my third point, does language shapes how we think? Here is a video on linguistic relativity and linguistic determinism, Linguistic 101.
When we talk about language, we often dig down to universal categories like nouns and verbs, consonants and vowels, phrases and sentences. We end up with these cross-language concepts that individual languages are built on, almost as if the colorful diversity found in the world's languages is just icing on the strong unity of the linguistic cake. And language is grounded in our way of thinking and processing information, which is itself universal among humans. So languages and cultures are superficial, but language and cognition run deep. But this isn't the only way to look at language. What if the language we are brought up to speak actually relates to the way we look at reality? From this perspective, a language is a particular way of conceptualizing the world and has close ties to culture. In the 1930s, Benjamin Lee Whorf talked about language this way. He argued that different languages represent different ways of thinking about the world around us. This view has come to be called linguistic relativity. Exploring the grammar of the Hopi language, he concluded that the Hopi have an entirely different concept of time than European languages do, and that the European concepts of time and matter are actually conditioned by language itself. One practical consequence of linguistic relativity, direct translation between languages isn't always possible. Since Hopi and English aren't simply ways of expressing the same thing in different words, you can't actually preserve thoughts or viewpoints when you translate between them. In its strongest expression, linguistic relativity, the idea that viewpoints vary from language to language, relies on linguistic determinism, the idea that language determines thought. In other words, how people think doesn't just vary depending on their language, but is actually grounded in, determined by the specific language of their community.
Which make me to conclude that language can influence how people think, how they express themselves, and how they feel about the space they are in, how they express color, time, and memories. Different language encourage different way of organizing information and different way of receiving that information.